How about now? There we go. I see the bar knowing now. Well, then you didn't hear me say that Windows decided to update repeatedly. So hopefully it didn't mess up too bad. Can you hear me now? Cool. Perfect. If the stream is live and the audio is working, then I'll figure out whatever else changed later. And I'll cut the first 5.5 minutes off this stream. Anyway, I did say welcome earlier, but clearly you didn't hear that. So welcome. Anyway, so what I just did, reopen Blender. We can fetch the Bevy type registry. That creates a bunch of property groups and other things. I've still got some of the logs in here, so that's what fired off. But if we click on the cube and we go with the new fresh information, we can select, say, team member and insert team member onto the cube, which is a Bevy component. The UI here looks a little funky, but basically, like, we've got the team member component. It's got a player field on it, which is a struct, which has some data, and it also has the top level field team, which can be, you know, green, red, whatever. So if I type in Chris here and hit tab, and I drag power up and down, you can see the values changing here on the left. I'm not going to touch test because that's important. But if we export here, and I go to the folder that I want to export, and this is, I guess we'll just start calling this stream. And we want this to be a separate GLTF and .bin and whatnot, because the GLTF file is actually JSON, and GLB will give us, like, effectively a binary file. We need custom properties to be enabled, which I don't know if we can warn about or not. I would love to be able to be like, hey, this needs to be enabled to use this. But this is our export plugin here called Skeen, which is just kind of like a temporary stand-in name that I'm not too upset by. So if we go to stream.gltf, then what we end up with is on the nodes inside of the, so there's scene. Scene uses nodes 0, which is the cube. Nodes 0 is this object here. This object has GLTF extras under the Skeen key, which is an array of component information. So reflection component information. And this has the full type path as the key and all of the values for those values as the, well, value. Which is very cool, because that means we have the full cycle working for effectively recursive struct-based components. And that is it. That is the whole thing. That is, well, that's all of the baseline stuff, effectively. The things we need to do, so this is the registry information for all the test components. The one that's working is this one, currently. So this is team members. It is a struct kind. It has a couple of properties. You can see player and team here. Player points to a component test player, which is another struct in this file. And this one points to component test team, which is an enum. So that's why we see this at the top level in the UI here. That's this enum. And then this is the struct form. And then team just has a kind of enum with one of these strings. And these things, working in tandem, all work inside of Blender. It's great. We also have task priority. Task priority is one of the things that will also, or should also work. All of the processing is here for that to work. But I tried it last night, and I kind of over-focused on team member. So I wasn't testing this with the new code. And I seem to have removed the form here. So the question there is, why? And I think I know why. So we'll start there for today. Basically, TLDR, we have the whole flow working for recursive data types, which is really the important part. And then everything on top of that is just filling out the other components and stuff. So picking the UI that we want, etc. So let me commit to make sure that we have what we have ready to go here, because otherwise we will end up with changes on top of changes on top of changes. I think this is all good. Those are all test GLTF files. I'm going to say working recursive team member component UI and export. I guess import UI and export, which is like the whole, that's everything. So I'll push that up. I forgot to check to see if the notification went out in Discord that I'm live. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It did not. That is interesting. So the question here is, we have additional types of components. Let's make this closer together, actually. Let's put these over here, over here, over here. Let me close that one. I always have too many desktops. So I think I know where this is because I put a pass in here explicitly. And I think that it's this. But if it's this, we have not another problem, but let's get this log back in here to confirm that this is actually where we need to be rendering this. I guess this wouldn't have component fields. So in this is render props. This runs in the draw for the panel. We get the layout from Blender. We get context, which is like the window object or the scene object or the like object like the cube or something like that. The context key, which is like the key that we need to access for the property on that context. And then the component data, which is the property group, which contains all the information for all the fields that we actually need to get. So we look through the annotations on these classes that we've constructed. And for each of those, we build the UI out. Now, the enum won't have annotations, so this won't fire. And this code is a little bit messy because you can see how I'm like getting annotations here, but also getting annotations here, which is fine. I guess we can move this in. No. I think we can move this in. I think we can take this and basically put it down here. But we'll hold off for a second. So if there are annotations, which is like the fields that we're supposed to display in the UI, then for each of those, we go through. If it's a pointer property, that means it's pointing to another struct. And there's these like arcane incantations for like determining whether it's a pointer property or not, etc., that I'm not super happy with. I would love to find better ways to do this, but I think this is the right way, actually. And then this is recursive as well. So if it's a pointer property, go into the next struct or into the next data type and render it. Otherwise, render the prop here. So we've got whether it's a pointer property, whether it's not a pointer property, and whether it doesn't have component fields. And I'm assuming that the enum doesn't have component fields. That's what I'm thinking. Which would make sense because it is not a type with annotations and whatnot. Add-ons. Drag this in. Okay. I always like to restart Blender I would like to, I guess, at some point create a test blend file, but I don't know that we're there yet. So this would be task priority. So no component fields not rendering for window manager active editor. So basically this is saying if the root editor is not a struct and it's just a field, which is possible, then it is not rendering it. So we can definitely deal with that. I don't know if this should be... I guess if we're here, and if the context key is active editor, then we do the render here. And get adder is basically dot syntax in Python. So context key, I think, is what we need. And I think that's fine. I think we don't need pass here for the other if. I think it'll just go through. So do our little add-on installation dance again. Open Blender back up. Grab the registry information. Another thing I want to do today is start writing that registry information out to disk so we can pull it back in. So we go task priority, insert, and we are getting what? This is some kind of error. Prop error with argument 1 data, function data expected in any type, not a string. And expected in any type, not a string. Oh, right, because we aren't supposed to get adder here. This is supposed to be, this is where types would have really helped me. This is supposed to be a 2-argument function, right? So there's this context key and the key. So this is how we should have done it. Because otherwise we have an empty, like an undefined in the second argument, basically. Fetch the registry information, task priority, insert, and now we have active editor high. So hopefully I can set this to medium and export, and hopefully the export will work. Include custom properties, Skeen, untitled. What are we calling this? Stream.gltf. We'll just overwrite whatever's there. So we can go take a look at stream.gltf and we get component test, task priority, medium. So I think this is generally speaking working. There might be some cases where we need to write extra metadata into these fields. We aren't using Ron kind of for that reason, so that we hopefully don't have to do that, but we'll see. I think that in the JSON format of the reflection data, like a multi-element tuple would just be an array. So we should be okay, but we'll find out. So task priority works. Let's make sure that team member still shows as expected. And it looks like it does. We've got player with a name, right? So if that's Chris, and then this is 0, we'll get rid of this log 2 because this is supposed to be rendering. Then we've got green, which we didn't touch. So if we export this into the same spot with the same settings, we should see component test team member as one of the components, with the default of green and a default of 0, and then the task priority medium, which is that enum. So that all looks good to me. I'm pretty sure that this format matches the test. Event ordering. I guess we do need a consumption test too, right? This is the registry information for component tests, which I guess I put in lib. Yeah. I should associate those two things a little bit better because I don't know how somebody who doesn't know that this exists is going to find it. But you see here, this is the format that we need. So it's an object with the type path in the key and the value in the, value slot. And the export that we got out from Blender is actually the same thing. So very happy with that. And then I think we just need to go through the other components and make sure they work. And I'm assuming that some of these will not, because I think player might be interesting. So player looks like it works. Right? Run it through the whole process, get that export in there, and then you can stick a player onto something. I think player is a component. Let's check to make sure. Player is its own component. So things that are components that contain other things that are also components work, which is very cool. Things that are not components contained within things that are components work. Enums, structs worked. Tuple struct. Well, two things really. One is, let's get rid of these logs because they are not accurate anymore. Well, that's accurate, but and then we have a safe list up here currently for which components we should actually process. And we need to remove this safe list at some point. But let's start off, I guess, with what? Player, task priority, team member. What else do we have in testing? Player, team member, task priority, tuple struct, marker, and some things. Why did I name that some things? So that's an enum, right? Yeah, okay. So yada, 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 commas. Okay, so now we should have all of these components processed, which is basically everything that we need. We'll remove that at some point. That was originally there just so that we wouldn't get errors on everything at the same time. But now that we're getting further, we can start removing it. Blender always takes a second to boot up. Fetch the registry. Didn't see any errors. So now we need to do, I guess, team member counts, right? I'll just set some values in here. No errors so far. Then we need things that we know work, like task priority and player. And then the things that we need to check are, let's start with tuple struct. Tuple struct doesn't have a property group. Key error, tuple struct. So that doesn't exist, which is interesting because we don't have the logic for that in make property yet. So make property is our recursive property group creation for the plugin. So this should be calling make property with the registry, the type path, and sort of like the cache of property groups. If we already have it, we return. It's interesting that that didn't throw errors earlier, though. I guess we just return in that case, right? I think we should be logging something out. So let's start putting some extra logs in here. Cool. Enum, print enum. We don't have an enum currently. This is printing, that's printing. This is a list. This is a map. I don't know that we'll need map and set. We'll see. So we've got struct, if properties, then we have fields that we need to create for the property group. If no properties, then we basically need an empty component, like an empty object in the output. Which I guess we could create an empty property group and that would just automatically do it for us. We could also do this in kind of like the export logic where we check to see if it's a marker. I think that doing it here is probably better. So we'll get to that when we do markers. Tuples are something that we need to handle as well. And then tuple struct is the one that we just ran into. Values are primitives, so they should just work. And all of those, I believe, are handled. String, float, int, uint. I think those are the only ones we have available to us. As well as like a debug for anything that we didn't handle. So tuple struct. If we look at tuple struct and we look at the component tests and we look at tuple struct, this is the registry information that we get for tuple struct. So it comes in as kind tuple struct, which we've already done kind of a match on, so we get to here. And then it's got prefix items. So I guess this is an array of stuff. I feel like interesting question, actually. So if we do lists, I think the lists have to be of specific types. In the UI, these could be, I guess, anything really. For us, for right now, we could support single element tuple structs pretty easily. I think we should do that to start. Because a single element tuple struct can be special cased. So what is our component prefix items length, which I think is a function in Python. So if the length is 1, then we special case this, else we want to print out this log because we haven't handled it yet. And I don't think we need pass if we have return. So if we do that, then this is a scalar effectively, or like a value. So for this, we have effectively this. So for key and properties, do that. For the scalars, we're just returning them regularly, which I think works fine like this. Now, the only question there is if we special case this, then we have to turn it back into an array later, I think. What is the value that we get? Lib. Let's check lib. Let's check our test. See, the marker component needs this kind of like empty object here. The tuple struct just needs the value for a single element tuple. So I think we have to special case this actually. I don't know that we always have a choice, but where's so I think we just get this. And I think we just return this. Because this will return the int property, and then this will just work. So let's bundle that up. We're going to check tuple struct. Drag this in. Close this out. Blender it back up. Fetching the registry didn't work because we don't have properties. We need component prefix items, 0 type. Single element tuple struct is a special case. We should probably leave some more comment here for other people who eventually look at this code. Let me grab the information from lib and put it in here. Where's tuple struct? Here's tuple struct. Give a nice example here so that people can actually, read this and be like, oh yeah, okay, that's what they mean. So if the length is 1, which I'm not sure this is the perfect way to do that, but you know, whatever. So component prefix item 0 type ref will give us this value, which we then call make property on with the registry information and everything. So we should get back that primitive. Fetch the registry. Back into tuple struct. Insert. We don't have a property group because this is not a property group. So the question is, we need to go through our rendering logic, I think. This is on 248 in update form. Let's go check 248. Really? 248? Oh, right, because this won't exist. Okay. I don't know how to handle that if let's do this. If type path in scheme property groups, do another guard here, and it's a class. And there's also the possibility that I shouldn't have named this tuple struct, but you know, you make mistakes. So tuple struct will not have property group is a single element tuple. It will be a whatever property. Nobody's going to understand if I write it like that. So int float string okay. So let's get rid of a bunch of this comment stuff too. This stuff goes, this goes. Cool. Can we new line on the end? I would. Okay, I guess we can't new line. I guess that's just going to be a really long line. Okay, so if this is a class, then we run this, and if not, then we go down and we do this, which is what should happen for it, I think. This is checking to see. So the key has to exist for it to access this, though, which is interesting. I think the issue that we're getting is it's not registered. Key error, component test, tuple struct, right? So it doesn't exist currently. So that would be in, let's see, marker, player. This is the other reason I'm safe listing this stuff right now, because I want it to be a readable set of print output. So make property, component test, task priority. That's not the one. Some things, team member, tuple struct. Make property, tuple struct. U32. So I guess I just didn't add it. Is really the issue. So I don't think that we need this check, actually. I think that what I did down here, so for tuple struct, we don't need to register a class, but we do need to set this stuff equal. So where do we do that for structs and stuff? This is basically what we need to do. But we only need this part of it. So back down in tuple struct, this is going to be type path equals make property, and then return the type path, the actual object. So that should fix our issue, because that should put it into our cache so that we can access it later. Getting better at Blender stuff. Hi, you can format Python code on multiple lines with backslash. You said you weren't showing up. This is when I write all my terrible Python code, when you can't see it. Okay, and then we get active editor. Active editor is not a good name for this. But I think that I'm fine leaving that until later. We also got rid of the thing that I wanted to write on a new line. So thank you for the suggestion. I will do that next time. So let's make sure this exports. And in a way that isn't like awful. Include custom properties. What are we calling this? Stream at the moment. And then the output is actually right here, which looks correct-ish. Let's find out. Tuple struct 380. That works. So now we've got tuple structs working. So we've got structs, we've got recursive structs, we've got enums, single element enums, enums as values. Let's find one of these other ones. What else do we have? Some things is going to be tougher, I think. Barbecue. Oh, more lawn mowing. Barbecue sounds better than lawn mowing. Okay, so team member, tuple struct, task priority. Now, if we look at the component tests, player, team member, tuple struct, marker, task priority, some things. We do need to deal with marker at some point, but I think that's just going to end up being like an edge case, like a side setting. Or maybe it's going to be in annotations. We'll see. Some things is an enum of two different kinds of structs. We handle both of these kinds of structs, single element tuple and also like named struct. Oh, Carnival is happening. That makes sense. I feel like I've been seeing that pop up in different places, but I have no idea when it actually is. I guess we need more examples is what we need. Some things will be next, but we aren't filled out on our match down here. So like technically speaking, we don't support everything. Multi-element tuple structs is something that we will need here. So maybe we add a component test for that. Some things derive tuple struct. And then let's have multi-element tuple struct, which is like we also don't have like a vec3 in here at all yet. So maybe we make this a vec3 as the second option. Make our life harder. And then like an I32 and a string. I feel like this is going to come in as an array, and thus it's going to be really awkward to deal with. Now, I don't suggest anybody writes a component like this, but I feel like we should support it at some point. So if we run this, then I can run my little tool here. Remove the registry. Run fetch. And then we'll have the registry file here. Oh, you know, did I not I didn't register it. I saw somebody working on potential automatic registration, which would be super cool because this is something I always forget to do. But we'll see if that lands. I feel like it came up once. It was, I don't necessarily want to say controversial, but couldn't come to agreement. And then we have the registry here, which means we should be able to do multi-element tuple struct. Why am I going in here like this? Because I want to grab this. And I'm going to dump it into this JSON file that is like the file we use for tests, basically. There's tuple struct. We'll drop it in right here. So tuple struct, type of array, prefix items, right? Tuple struct, type of array, prefix items. But prefix items is going to be a heterogeneous list. So that gives me pause. I guess we just use key names of like 0 and 1 and stuff. Feels really awkward. We would have to special case the export, I think, to handle that. We also need vec3 here and string. Do we have vec3 here and string? String UFI string. We already have string. We need vec3. This will be interesting because it will be kind of our first third party. Type in the tests. So use string, and let's put that here. So we're going to have an option here too. We could special case glamvec3 because we know glamvec3 is always going to be a thing. There's subtypes for the UI that we can use for different things. I'm like 50-50 on even trying to special case glam. I think we don't for now. I think we just treat it as another struct. Wait, you can use both at and hash for mentions in YouTube chat? I don't know. I have no idea. Does it work? You can mention me to test if you want to. Yeah, I know. I see it. I didn't know if that was just like a thing they typed or if it was an actual mention. So glamvec3 is a struct. The struct has X, Y, and Z properties. We already handle that, so I think that should just work. And then I think we want to handle tuple struct. I feel like it would be nice if we could do a collection property here, but I don't think we can. Because we don't have a single type. We would effectively have to have, I think, an enum of all types that could be used here. Which we could create. But would just be kind of like really annoying. I think we deconstruct this into what is effectively a struct of numbered fields. Does timer have reflect? Let's find out. I don't even think I have a Chrome window open. We're past Chrome. We're in a post Chrome era. Docs, Bevy, timer. Because timer isn't even a component, is the thing. So it does derive reflect and reflect default. I checked reflect default and we actually don't get any data there. At some point after this project is up and working, it would be cool to potentially contribute the like default reflection information. I wonder if the at just doesn't matter. Like the hash doesn't matter. Does it bring up the autocomplete? Because I'm pretty sure if you type out a name exactly, it'll match. That's really funny. It's funny that you typoed it and that it works. So timer has a bunch of stuff. Stopwatch has a duration. Duration is duration constructible without doing one of the functions? secs and nanoseconds. Nanoseconds is what type? So like this gets pretty hairy, I guess. So num niche types nanoseconds. Not Bevy, num. And this isn't niche types as in like special case. This is niche types as, well, it is niche types as in special case, but it's niche types as in niche specifically, not as in just like esoteric types. So nanoseconds is probably what we need to look for here then. Maybe not. Maybe they don't even export it. Wild. Create num niche types. Oh, it's in Bevy. No, it's in core. That's even worse. Number of times I look at the Rust docs. That was blinding. Nightly only experimental API. Nanoseconds doesn't show up anywhere. It's only in core, so I'm in standard. Ugh. Why is this so hard to get around? Nanoseconds just doesn't exist. So where does that come from? Oh, nanoseconds is unsafe too. Here's nanoseconds. So it's a private in-core time. So the timer as it currently exists would probably need a special case. I don't know what the reflection information looks like for a timer. We can check. Where is the thing that we need? I'm just going to call this timer container. We'll throw this down here, I guess. Where's single element tuple? So if we do this with a timer, and we run that, unsatisfied trait bound. Serialized, deserialized can't be done for timer. So I actually think that it's prevented at the type level. Unsafe because it cannot be greater than or equal to 10 to the 9th. Yeah, I don't know why it's unsafe. The nanoseconds is internal, so that sort of implies to me that it like represents something very low level as opposed to being like a safe, generally usable type. Timer doesn't implement serialize and deserialize, which I think is the thing that will get us here. So timer container gives us a Bevy time timer, which gives us duration bool, timer mode, stopwatch. core time duration gives us nothing. So theoretically, we would need to have a handling for duration, right? Because this is a kind value, right? So we handle value kinds ourselves. That's what this is. So actually, is this the right case? I have so many cases here. Component type. And then this is core time duration. So this is a value that is an object. And then I think the only thing that we have to go on is this being this type specifically. There's no other information. What are we using for the other? I keep going to the other desktop because I think it's... so if we're a float, we just use float property. String property, etc. So for object, we would need to test... Did it again. We would need to test for the type path exactly, I think. I'm going to put this code here. Just so that we know it's unhandled. Unhandled value of object type. And then we print type path. And then this is duration, I guess core time duration is currently not handled. And then we just return here. So now at least we have the error handling in place to be like, hey, you're trying to do a timer or a duration or whatever. Unrelated, but you just learned that a myriad is a tuple of length 10,000. Fortunately, you did not get there yet in your Bevy code. That's good. Because it wouldn't work. Tuples of length, what is it? It's implemented for tuples of length 16, I think, is the max. Something like that. So you won't even get to 50, much less 10,000. But this is cool. I guess there's other core things, right? Like I could go through and just list this. There's I-128. I guess people could be using that, and we don't currently support it. Pet graph, animation node, node index for pet graph. So that's interesting because the node index for pet graph is a value. And theoretically, if you wanted to set the node index, you couldn't. Right? Because there's nowhere to go from here. And there's no way for us as a third-party extension. I know that you were involved in the first party, second party, third party discussion the other day. There's no way for us as like a consumer of a third party crates types to know what this value is supposed to be. So I think anytime there's kind value, we don't actually get any other information. So maybe I used this specifically as an example of like, hey, this can happen. Oh, you started it. Well, to be fair, I have seen that discussion happen multiple times. That is, for some reason, something that people keep like, nobody can agree on the definitions. And the people who can agree are like, well, I could see the other people's way. So like, the people who know are twisting themselves in intellectual knots, understanding every different way that you could conceivably understand it. And the people who don't know are just using it. And then there's a huge discussion that starts off about what first, second, and third party are. And I think I've seen that at least 3 times. Which is kind of hilarious. So like small string. What do we do about small string or path buff? I guess these are all good examples, right? You do have systems that have a tuple of parameters because of the 16 limit. Yes. You can nest arbitrarily. Hopefully you'll never get to a 10,000 level of nesting. Where do we put this? Because this is like interesting and relevant information. Development. Value types. Maybe. Some examples include, I don't think anybody's going to want to set a node index for pet graph. So let's try to find a different one that somebody might want to use. Cowster. Asset path. Ooh, even entity is a value. Wait, if entity is a value, can we do relationships by setting entity values? I need to look into this. This has been on my mind with the new relationship stuff. I haven't looked. I don't think the scene example was updated to show relationships. But doing relationships inside of Blender feels very useful. So we can set the entity value type, right? And we can hard code what that is. But we couldn't construct a value of type entity here without knowing stuff beforehand. So I think that's another good example of something that like somebody might want to use, but is not really. Let's just keep this as actual JSON so it highlights. So there are primitive types in the Bevy reflection data that have a kind of value but do not have additional information about what values they contain. We can't build UI for these without hard coding assumptions into the Python add-on. Some examples include small string, path buff, and entity. I guess I'll fully qualify this, right? Some examples include third-party types, like smallster, standard or core types, like path buff, entity. Would need to make the proper mapping between the GLTF entity and the true entity on Bevy. Yes. Because we'll have those nodes and whatever and the IDs and whatnot. I don't know if any of them are reliable for this specifically, but you would need to, the way that I was thinking about doing it, worst case scenario, is that you could actually stick two IDs in two different places. So like generate a UUID, for example, stick that in a special component on object and a special component on the target or something like that. And then you could go through and use those IDs for the relationships. And it would just require like a 2-pass approach instead of a single-pass approach, which is what we have now. So you could do the scene spawn, the scene instance ready. The scene instance ready, you would gather up all of that UUID data in the first pass. And then in the second pass, when you're inserting all the reflection component data, use those UUID to entity ID mappings to insert the reflected relationship information. So like we can do it. That experience doesn't sound great of like doing that inside of Blender, like generating UUIDs and stuff. But worst case scenario, we can do it. And I do think that supporting it is important. I hope we can support it through like Blender links or something, or some kind of like link this thing to that thing functionality inside of Blender. I know you can target other entities in the UI and stuff like that, so maybe we can find a way to build that. But at the very, very least, we can do that UUID approach. So this concretely, I guess duration is another one that we could include, right? It's just that timer is more complicated than these. Make a scheme GLTF type as an at-set transformer so it's done on load time. I'm trying to avoid custom GLTF types. The asset transformer is not a bad idea. But we can look into that later. And Blender names are unique. This might help. Oh, that's true. Forcibly unique, right? Unfortunately, I don't know if we can... Anyway. Yeah. Names are unique. That is a good note. Okay. So the other thing you can see here is that like these have default implemented, but we don't get any default data. So it would be cool if we could get default data at some point. I know that generates Rust code though. And I don't know if we can get any of that actual information in the reflection. That would be an experiment. Can we add any reflected default data to the registry information and use that in Blender for default values? Relationships. How can we support a good Blender UI for assigning relationships? Because these are effectively, at the end of the day, just components and lists and stuff, right? So there is going to be many-to-many, N-to-M. There's going to be one-to-one, and there's going to be one-to-many relationships in Bevy. So we will have to like look at what's coming in. Is there any other interesting future work? I feel like I should have been writing this down the whole time. Can't think of anything off the top of my head, so I'm going to leave it there. So basically, like duration is something that we don't support currently. We could put a bunch of other things. One to N, yeah, one to many is already in. Yes, that is the parent-child one, or parent-children. Parent child of children. It's the child of children one. I don't know. I didn't have a problem with parent children, but I guess some people were having an issue. It's now child of with a name of parent, so it's like struct child of parent entity. Like this is the relationship now. So hopefully that will assuage everybody's concerns about it, and we can move on from discussing parent-child naming conventions. Okay, so I don't think we can do heterogeneous lists. In the Blender UI. I think we have to split this out into individual field names and pretend this is a struct. Maybe we can, and I'm just not thinking about it correctly. Maybe it's just a list as an ID property attached, and then we just go through the ID property to the index, and that's the actual property. Can we combine them like that? I don't know. I feel like that would make the UI weird, but it would help our data structure. So prefix items, I guess it's an open question then. We could do what, a custom UI list for this? But that would require kind of the same thing we're currently doing. I guess the real question is, can we do, where's my Chrome window? There's my Chrome window. Can I search for everything that implements component? I should be able to, right? Trait component, scroll down. Okay, all of this stuff. None of it shows the information that I want, though. So maybe we just look at our registry information. I feel like I want to write a script for this and not check 20,000 lines. I guess prefix items, right? Prefix items that are greater than 1, of which I don't see any. I feel like I would be surprised if Bevy had this internally. But the way to confirm that is either go through all of them or I feel like I'll call this out as explicitly unsupported at the moment. I think multi-element tuple structs are an anti-pattern in the general case. Not that we shouldn't support it, but I feel like putting effort into supporting something that really should just be a struct with 2 named fields and is an easy workaround is probably not what we should be spending our time on. And all of these are single element, as far as I can tell, except for our special, like, this one doesn't work version. Hey, Arcane Journey. How's it going? So do I have... I feel like at one point I had a bin that would print out the reflection information. Maybe we just write a test and do it in there. Marker component, this is the tuple struct. I'm going to write the test and be like, hey, this is ignored. Because I think I'm not against supporting it. in general. But these are all redefined here. I don't like redefining them in general. Let's do component tests, I guess. Grab this, pull it in. I don't like having these in two different places. That feels awkward and bad. So 12, like vec3, 0, 2, and testing. And then this will fail when we test it. Also unrelated, but an animation movie Flow made in Blender won an Oscar. Oh, they did. That's cool. Good for them. So this is the data that we would expect. I guess this test still works then, right? Like, this is just what it would show up as, but we don't support. And it is this like array of strings and structs and stuff. So maybe I just include that test, but add a comment that, hey, this isn't supported at the moment. Alice made a post on Mastodon commanding the movie for a win. Sweet. That's great. I mean, I love to see open source maintainers supporting other open source maintainers, and, you know, that falls into that category. Where do I put the comment? The Goo Labs NPR. Oh, did it actually get merged, or are they still just like working on it? My impression was that was just like a continuous future thing. Is it usable now? The Goo Lab stuff is really, really cool. Don't know. Yeah. I don't know either. It's very cool. But I don't know that it is particularly relevant to my Bevy work or anything. Okay, so we've got a test for this at least. So it is known uncovered, if that makes sense. And it exists in component tests now. So if we wanted to, we could pop this up in the UI and see what it does. I guess I should have the same comment here. That seems right. At least we know that it exists then. Which brings us to enums. If I'm going to skip that, then we have to go to enums, some things. So that's this. And I'm expecting this to fail. Yeah, no property group set because we're not setting it. think we have all this information already. The question is, how do we set up a form for this? I think we set up like a combo box, I guess. Right? Because this is just like the two things that we already have. Do we registry some things is basically just more information, so it like nests the registry information, which means that we could take this type path, construct this as a struct or a tuple or whatever it is on its own, and then just switch in a combo box based on the value that we're supposed to have there. What does the actual data look like? Where's lib? The data for this is got the name of the variant, so we do need that as the field. I think we're going to need to do some reordering here. Maybe. Some things, one thing, name testing. So some things is the reordering we do. So like this is the value that we need. Right? Which means that we basically have a struct with some optional fields at the end of the day. All types will eventually be in terms of primitive types. Yes. That is how that works, for sure. Right? Like everything eventually will be like a string or an I32 or a whatever. And in Blender, we only have a limited set of those primitive types. But the way that this works, right? So if we do 2 tests here, and this is not one thing, but this is low with a 12, then I would expect this to be low with 12. Like I expect with, yeah, that's right. So this test should pass. We had 7 before, we should have 8 now. And it doesn't because I didn't do my parentheses correctly. Is that true? Scheme low 12. Scheme low 12. Oh, there's an extra bracket. Or brace or whatever you want to call it. So we would ideally want to do the same kind of recursion here. I know we can construct a like enum tuple or whatever. Right, we've got, where's items? We have that somewhere. That's annotations, or I did have that somewhere. Yeah, here we go. We use that for the component list. This component list is this UI. and we use scheme components. Or actually, we don't use this, do we? Prop search, selected component, components. I guess scheme components is dead. We don't use this anymore. So component list, here we go. This components is what we use. So we clear, we make property groups, and then we add to components, and then this does not exist anymore. But we did have it at one point, and it is a combo box. The combo box is just really, 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 really big for components. So what does that mean? I think these are all strings. Not UI operators. I want, what do I want? Enum property, which with our luck will not have anything. Sick. Types property. Props enum property. I mean, that'll give us what we need. Props enum property. Cool. Okay. So this takes into items, which is a sequence of tuples of various kinds. Kind of an overloaded function here. But they are all strings and ints. So identifier, name, description, icon, number. So we would need enum property. We would need a field on that property group for the selected enum property. And then based on that field, we would render either one of the forms. There's a known bug with using a callback. Okay, I don't think we're using a callback. For dynamic values, a callback must be passed, which returns a list in the same format as a static list. Oh, so we can fill this with whatever we want. That's cool. Yeah. And then because this is an enum property, we have to look at the value to be able to render. That value hopefully gets set. Maybe not. But I guess let's start with what we have to do here, which is we have to build out this enum. Right, this enum object is unimplemented. Let's move this over here. Get rid of this, get rid of this, get rid of this. And then where's our enum registry data? Tuple struct, some things. So we need to dig into this enum right? This will be object. So we'll be here. And we're doing one of on the other side, right? I guess we're basically going to do the same thing. And then this isn't that. This has to be item where? Short path. So theoretically, we end up with an enum property that has items. I don't think we want to update component data here. Maybe we do. I think we do. Maybe this will be an extra function though. Maybe this will be like update enum form or something. I don't know. We'll see. Get this in here, delete this, close everything out, reopen Blender. We're doing a lot of Blender on stream lately. Guess it's been what, like 2 weeks since we started this? So some things, use it, insert it, and then this is either one thing or low. And this is like the disconnect point. The Blender UI shows it in one way, and we have to convert it to being like an object, like a key for an object. I don't think we can get that to be directly represented in the Blender UI. I'm trying to think through. Actually, we can. Now that I think about it. We can set up, well, no, we can't. No, wait, I think we can. Sorry. Working through this in my head and not explaining it. If we set up one struct with fields that are these things, so field is one thing, field is low, right? Then we get to use our recursive form stuff, which is great. And we just cut off the rendering of one of those at any given time. So based on this enum, which the value for this doesn't actually matter in the end, then we will show the form for updating either one of those values. But it will be the full struct for everything. I think that's the best way to go about this, actually. So instead of this enum property then, which I think we will have to need, but we'll leave it for a second. Like we'll still need this option, but it'll be more for the UI than for the data. So given that, what we actually want is effectively a struct. And we either have to have a tuple or a struct here. So we know that we have to have something worth creating another value for. So if properties and components here doesn't make sense, but for will, but we'll use this whole thing, right? So we'll need to create component test some things one thing and component test some things low. But those won't be in the key value, will it? So we have to find a different way to look these up. This is really awkward. Let's see. I guess the first thing I want to do is, instead of for key and properties, this is going to be for option in one of, right? So we actually need this whole struct thing. It's going to be basically the same code, but special cased. So because we have an object, we know we have properties because of the enum. This comes down a level, and then it's for option in component one of dot items, because this is a list. So this is like, there's no key here though. Is that items? I don't know. I don't think we need items. I think this is just a list. So this is option short path. And then make property needs to happen. And we'll end up putting this type in at the top. So this is recursive. We'll get the type path. The type path here will not remove the prefix because it doesn't matter. Right? We'll insert that, or this looks it up directly in the registry, which is the issue. So here we can't look it up directly in the registry. Maybe we bounce out to a different function. Maybe we bounce out to like make subproperty. That feels really weird to have done though, because really everything else is the same. So maybe we do an optional argument for component or registry data. That feels really awkward. We could also construct that key and put it in the type path, which I don't want to do. We could do an if here. Because these don't start with defs. So if we're doing something that doesn't start with a def, then we are either at the root or we are doing a new struct. I feel like I would just want the extra argument. Override component. This is the else case, and this is the can I set that like that? That feels really weird to do. Is that shadowing or is that resetting the variable? We're gonna call this original type path. So we're going to set type path to the original type path. We're going to set component to nothing. Can we do that? Equal none. If override component, component equals override component, right? Otherwise, strip the type path or strip the beginning off the type path and get it from the registry. Is there a way to document Python arguments? Ah, yes. Triple quotes inside of the function. That would have been my guess. So that's this, then. So I'm writing my documentation wrong here. So let's grab all of this and drop it in here. And hopefully that works for documentation purposes. And then param property groups, registry, original type path. Is there a Python documentation tool that will like document this actually, or is this like just going to live in my code comments forever? So this is either a full type path, and then I want to give an example. All types will then, or some LSPs accept that. Cool. That's great. I love that. Override component. An optional value that is used when you have access to the registry type information, but that registry type information is not directly accessible by registry type path. This happens in complex enums. Okay. And then hopefully we get rid of this other documentation that isn't. I guess what I can do default none here then. Scheme property groups is we'll mutate this to add more property groups. And then the registry is the dict representation of the Bevy registry information. Okay, so I can't read this block of text, but hopefully that will show up for somebody at some point. And now it's at least documented that this behavior is weird. I guess technically we should be doing this either way. So the type path is always that, and then component is set to either the override or the registry type. That cleans that up a little bit. It applies logic where it doesn't need to be applied, but at least it's consistent and readable. So that means that, did we write this correctly? No, we need more to do. So for option in whatever, right? If the property we've created is a class, which it always will be in this case, but I feel like we should also still just keep the check because it doesn't cost us anything. Annotations key is bpi props pointer property. So annotations, and then we use what is the key. Ooh. Wonder how many times I've sneezed on stream. When using the ternary operator for component would be better for the LSP. The ternary operator for component. What is the ternary operator for component? I guess that's just a regular if, let me look up the syntax for the ternary operator. If whatever equals else. If override component. Yeah, what do I do for the check then? Oh, this, if that, else odd. That I would not have gotten. So override component if override component else registry type path. And then this is component equals. Like that. Component equals component. Component equals override component. Else registry. Looks good to me. Thanks. I assume you write more Python than I do. So this is the most Python I've written in years, honestly. So, you think it shouldn't have the override part? There's no override component is the thing that we're passing in. That will, right? I can be explicit here too. I think that's unPythonistic, but makes me feel a little bit better. So override component, if it's not equal none, right? Otherwise, registry type path, because registry type path will be a key error. So we have to write it like this. You somehow thought it was a bool. Yeah. I mean, it could have been anything. I was talking about what it could be for a while there. Am I allowed to do this, though? I would love to have these all on separate lines. Perfect. Okay, so this should give us the component that we're looking for, which this component should be this object information. So that should be like this component kind here will be this struct, and then everything looks exactly the same as it does normally. So that should all be good. And then the weird part is going to be option. What are we doing here for the short path? I think that it's short path, right? Hopefully that short path can't be the same. I don't think it can. So key equals option short path. And then we make the property for that. Make property, registry, component, properties. No, we don't need component properties. Component properties, key, type ref. We need this to be the root, right? So this is going to be type path. And then we're going to pass in the component itself, because we're overriding it. So this is definitely like double setting this information when we don't really have to. But I'm okay with this being consistent in the first three, and then this just being the extra. So this property should be built out correctly then. This should be a pointer property if it's a class, otherwise it'll be a field. It'll never be this annotation here. So I think right, just keep our logs here. It should be a property. If it's not, then we have serious problems. I don't really know what to do there if that happens. That should never happen. But I guess it's theoretically possible because we're doing the same logic in a different place. And I would like to know that this happens if it does happen. We don't really have any guarantees. Like, it shouldn't, but we don't have any guarantees that it won't. So I want to have the print. So at the end of the day, we end up with the property groups. These are all keys on that object. Our object is what? For option in component, we construct these property Does struct have property at the top and I just missed it? No, this sets the annotations. And annotations is all the way up here for no reason. Let's move this down, I think, because I don't think we use it anywhere else. So annotations here, right? We don't use it down here. We don't do it anywhere. So let's localize it. Because otherwise it's just like, why is that up there, you know? And then in Enum object, we also need an annotations because we're going to make this type class, right? Scheme property groups. Type path, is type path our original type path? I think it is. Yes. So this is the Enum class that we're building, which is coming in as a struct for us. We need to register it, so we do. We return it. And I think that should build us out what we're looking for. Since we had failing tests here that I was staring at, I'm going to run the tests too. Cool. And then we need to drag this into the preferences. Get rid of this. Call Blender. Fetch the registry data, which breaks for marker. And I guess override component is required. So how do I do Python optional arguments? Just use the args parameter. Oh. The Python LSP of VS Code seems much better than the open source ones. I don't know that I've used much of the LSP. Interesting. So can I do this and that would work? Let's find out. I feel like I would like to avoid using like quargs or whatever. Maximum recursion depth exceeded while calling on a Python object. Okay, so I messed up the recursive call there. Come on, let me make this bigger. I guess we can just close Blender for the moment. Okay, enum object, option one thing. One thing is recursing infinitely. I guess maximum depth is somewhere around 1,000, so don't have an object with 1,000 levels of structs. Or enums, I guess. Why is it recursing is a great question. So for enum, component type, right? We get down to object, annotations. We see this option print, right? Option one thing. Right, we don't want component type path, we want option type path. And we need option here. because otherwise we're just sending back up all of the regular stuff, right? So it was literally just infinite recursion. Yikes. Edit preferences. I'm tossing windows around all over the place at the moment. Fetch the registry. Registry looks good. Go to the UI. UI is some things was the one. So that's this. Insert that. And then we get one thing name. And we get the other one has an error. So registry type path properties player type ref. Key error properties. Right, in update component form for sure. Hey Krads, how's it going? So interesting note, let's go to update component form. This, I believe, is what's failing. 269? 264. 264 is this one. Yeah, that makes sense because it doesn't have player because this is just a hard-coded random log. Sick. And then technically we don't necessarily have registry type path available to us. I guess we could chop the end off if we... Couple of different ways we could do this. Registry type path. The issue was properties, right? So when we update the component form, so when we select the component we've inserted on the Blender object, that is the Bevy component, we check to see if it's a class in Scheme property groups, which it will be there. Then the active editor is set to a pointer property to the property group that we created in that other function that we were just working with. We get the annotations off of that property group, iterate over each of the keys and values. We apparently don't use the value for whatever reason. We fetch the registry component data, which doesn't exist for the variance, but does exist for the root. We are getting the root here. And then registry component data kind equals struct. Is this not fully recursive? I don't think it's fully recursive. So we need to do that too at some point. I need to have a test struct that is like 6 levels deep. Registry component data kind equals struct. This is just on the top level. This code doesn't do anything. I think this is dead code. Oops. I don't think we need that at all. I think this whole thing goes away because of the refactor that I did. Whoops. That's why it was erroring. Because it's unneeded, hopefully. Okay, fetch, everything works. Some things, insert, everything works, except for the fact that we don't get the form for the second item. Why don't we get the form for the second item? We'll have to look at the draw. But this is what we will want. We will want some things to show either one thing or the other one. I know I named it such illuminating names. Let's go check our draw function. So draw is again recursive. God, I'm glad I learned recursion like 10 years ago. This would just be such a pain if I didn't. So this yada yada property is build UI. Build UI calls render props. Render props, I don't think is logging anything out at the moment. So the only place at which we don't render is this one. So let's print the context in the context key here. And then we recurse here. We render the prop here. We're not seeing any errors, so either of those should work. This should print this at some point. This is a special case of the value, which I think is what we have for the other option. So I think that this actually turns into this, but we'll have to check to see what that does to the other components. I know I'm just tossing around words like this and that and whatever and some things and whatever. So if anybody has questions, feel free to ask them. I'm happy to actually explain. Okay, so some things here. Insert. Now we get name and one thing. This is what was being prevented earlier with that code not rendering. Because we can run into a situation where we basically have that intermediary root key and we don't want to show a value for that because there's no reason for us to. So we get one thing here, insert, create name, short path. So this was not currently the answer. So why is that not rendering? Is it not in the property group? We should check that. Did we have logs for that? I think we do. Where is some? Here's some things. Option one thing, make property one thing, registering one thing, option low, make property low. Tuple is unimplemented in make property. That's what we need to do. Didn't expect complex enum to have a raw value as a variant. But that's not the variant because I wrote that code when I thought it was the ancestor. So this is true, is the issue. We weren't setting it in the property group. And then some things here should render for us. And it doesn't because none type object has no attribute function. Not rendering something. None type object has no attribute function. Component fields key. So let's print here. Key component fields. Key. Component fields, key. This is in get data from active editor. So this is like even further than we were. Let's just print this for now. Blender. Fetch the registry, everything's good. Some things, insert, that's where we get the error because it's trying to update the data. And our logs say insert, update form, type path some things. That's the insert. And then this is just not rendering something. With the context, component tests some things and one thing, because that is not a field on component tests some things, or it should be. I think it should be. Where is not rendering something? This is not rendering something. So this component fields get annotations for component data. Component data in this context is not getting printed. So let's print component data. I think this is render. So component data should be the property group. Got to do our little install dance again. Fetch the registry, everything's good. Get some things in here. Insert. That's our error. We're getting a bunch of logs because I keep mousing over the panel. And then we scroll back up to where it originally happens, and component data is the component test some things class, which is a property deferred pointer property. Okay, so we get component test some things, and then we're recursing down into the pointer property, or we get the pointer property, right? I think this is recursive if I remember. I think we're in update component form actually. This is in render props. Okay, so component data is in render props. This is recursive. It is rendering. The annotations are what? I should have rendered component fields. The annotations have to be empty, is really what's going on here. So the annotations have to be empty. This is for one thing. Because object has no attribute function here. Right? Draw, render. Wish I had more logs. I think this not rendering something is good. That's the one that we don't want to see. So we do component data. We get through that. And then we fail here, right? 651. Yeah. So we're failing here. So let's print subfield key. This is a true debugging stream at this point, especially with Python in the way that I don't know exactly how to write it correctly. Yada yada yada. Get back to our root. Geez, I really rendered this a bunch, didn't I? Okay. Component class or component data, one thing. One thing is a property deferred, and low is none. Low should not be none. Is this old? No, because we just did subfield. So low being none is really weird. Tuple is unimplemented in make property. That's our issue. Didn't I read that earlier and then ignore it? So this is kind tuple, which I think works out the same way as, oh, that's the only kind tuple. This is the test data, right? Let's go for this. Let's go for kind tuple. This is in some things, in enum, in enum, in enum, in enum. This type may only ever be in an enum. And that's why we didn't see it before. No, here we go. There's an actual tuple, unit, which you're not supposed to insert. Don't insert unit. And then I guess technically there's all of these things, but they have to implement component anyway. I don't think any of these actual like tuples are registered, so we would never see them. Okay, so tuple, we have a single element tuple. That's this again. I think tuple and tuple struct are actually the same thing. Unimplemented make property for lengths longer than one element. I'm going to copy this down as well, down here. So I think we just weren't constructing our property correctly. Which means that I definitely did some extra printing that we didn't need to do before. Because I'm pretty sure I saw that, read it earlier, and then forgot. That doesn't mean we also don't have other problems, but subfield low, attribute low. There we go. One thing in name. Now, currently, if we export this, I believe we will get both of these values, or it will break. One of the two options. Let's go with stream. Let's go with split. Let's go with custom properties, export. And if we look at stream.gltf, we end up with component test some things, one thing, and low. So that's all good. Everything works. This will not reflect correctly because you either need this, right, with one thing here, or you need this, but you can't have both, right? So now there does need to be some kind of filtering here for which one you are choosing and which one you're rendering for the form. So I think that when we create an enum, we could create an enum property like we were trying to do earlier and set that to the active one. We could use that active one to set whether we are rendering one form or another, right? The only thing that makes me nervous about that is I think we want to prevent those values from trying to be constructed. Because right now, if we do it this way, all variants need to be constructible. And I think that's an okay requirement, but I think that that is also potentially restrictive. So we don't have an option here yet. Let's get rid of some of these logs because we don't really need them anymore. And then I think not rendering something is fine. I don't think we want the log there all the time. Warning, unrelated. I did not know just. It seems cool. Why do you not have an install command that copies the add-on into Blender's add-on directory? Because I started doing that, and the way that I started doing it was trying to symlink the directory in, and the symlink didn't work, and then I had to undo that, and then I started working on it, and then at that point, I just hit my time limit for working on it. That's all. So I could have that. Just is also very cool. It's like make, but it's not arcane. So yeah, I don't have the install because I started writing an install, or I started trying to get that to just work. I actually have this copy for dev thing here, which tries to copy the extension into the right location. But I don't think this worked. Extension, application, scheme. Let's see if it works. Oh, you know what the issue is? Whatchamacallit? Is that an issue? It just unzips to this directory, right? So let's go check this out before we do this. Doesn't exist. Directory not found. Did I mistype application support? Whatever. Blender 4.2 extensions, user default, this one. Why does that still have PyCache in there? That shouldn't have PyCache in there. So let me just make sure this isn't still like a symlink that I left here. I don't think it is anymore, but. Okay. I am satisfied. So here's the path. Just here. Yeah, copy recursively the extension into that directory. Should be it, right? And then I know there's a reload command. I actually don't know what it is offhand. Fetch. Some things. We are significantly fewer logs, so I'm going to assume that worked, and then we're here. Cool. Yeah. So basically, because I just wasn't using it, I literally had it written, and I don't think I ever actually tested that command. I think I wrote it and got distracted. That's why. I think I wrote it and got distracted, is all that was. It's like 11. So I think that I'm going to commit this to start because this works. Implement basic complex enum support. And then, so I think on the property group, we want to construct that enum and add it into that property group and then take advantage of that later. So we could specially name it. Render props, build UI. So the only downside of this approach at the moment is that it requires that all variants are constructible, and we do actually construct all of them. I want to test at some point. So let me fit this in a set this in the development future work. How does it handle like 6th level nested structs was a question we had earlier. And right now we have the question of if a variant of an enum, of a complex enum, is not constructible, what happens? Can we just drop non-constructible one? Or render a note in the UI? I think that's good enough for a note. Basically, the idea being like right here we have one thing, which is a name, and low, which is an I32. But what if we had like timer, which we can't construct? Or what if we had like something for which the value doesn't work? Then we should be able to construct the other two because those are totally possible to be constructed in Blender. But the third one should just be like silently ignored for the purposes of the property group stuff, but also represented in the UI so that you can click it and then the UI tells you, hey, this is not a constructible version of this variant for whatever reason. Blender reload commands work, but the add-on would need to have some hack to re-import stuff that's already imported when reloading. Yeah. I do have that old script stuff with the main and the init stuff. So I do have a hack in here for running it as a script. And we're still in a single file, which is probably still a bad idea. But, okay, so with that in mind, when we make props, make these property groups, the thing that we need to do is what? We need to set up this enum, which is this enum. Which is not a type path. So this will give us the key to choose. Where's the annotations? Annotations, what do we call this? Call it something really ridiculous like this and then name it variant. So it shows in the UI as variant, but it is this like internal name inside of it. And then I think that just works for the UI anyway. I almost built the zip again. That is better. That's so much better than opening the edit panel. Thank you for bringing that up, Xavier. I already had the command written too. I don't know why I wasn't using it. Actually, I do know why I wasn't using it, but okay, so some things, variant one thing, right? So we can set those values. And now we need to use that value when we're rendering. So in render props, we will be add a pointer property, right, to this struct. And this will be for each key, really. So the question will be, I guess component fields will either be inspections get annotation data, and then here we can override like if this in component fields. This and the actual value. I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll find out. List indices must be integers or slices, not strings. Because so scheme enum index is there. And one thing is there. And what we really need is the value of this, right? So did we get adder on that? I guess we should be doing dot items here just to make it clear that this is an object. Can we pluck these out of an object? Is that a possible thing to do? Python pluck keys from object. I don't want to convert it into JSON. That sounds terrible. For why is this LST? That doesn't, shouldn't that be key value? For key value in items for D and list. As list comprehension syntax that I'm not familiar with. I think the only list comprehension syntax I'm familiar with is Haskell's, which is significantly different. Property deferred. This is component data. Component data is undocumented, so that's my own fault. Component data is the property group, which is the type and not the value. So if we have this, then we can do get attr context key and this will be window enum key, right? Window enum key. So I think this will work. So we need this value. Active enum variant is this. Let's print active enum variant. And then we need an object that is scheme enum index and can I just put a variable name here? Chances that works. Fetch registry. Some things, insert. Cannot access local variable key where it's not supported. Okay, we should get some of those logs though, right? No. Is key not a thing here? Why am I using key? That's what needs to be there. That's what needs to be there. Copy for dev, quit Blender, don't save before closing, open. Registry type. I swear I will have opened this panel 1,000 times before. Okay, so now one thing or low. You can now choose between them in the UI. This doesn't affect the export, but this allows you to specify which variant you want to set and then get a form for that variant. Now, this has all of the data for the export. So the other thing we'll need to do is basically this same thing, Let's see. Update component data should have something. Get data from active editor is a recursive thing that does this. Component fields, I'm going to go with probably this is where we need to do it. Bit of duplicate logic, but in general, that's kind of true. So here, I think we want to do this in the exporter. Right now, we're still setting the values by pulling the data out of the form and putting it back onto the object. But I do think at some point that I want to try to put these property values directly on the object so that we don't have that layer of indirection, and then hopefully get rid of some code. So I think I'm going to do move skein enum index logic to exporter, maybe. Possibly useful for moving form active form to components list. You can share how the reload function is supposed to work. One sec. Nice. I think it's, so let me show you what I have down here before you go off and I have this. I don't know. I don't think it calls unregister. Can you post a link? Maybe. You can try. I can't enable it as far as I know. You can definitely post it in Discord if you have a Discord. But YouTube is pretty aggressive about removing links. If you have a Discord, then you can post it here. If not, then I think we're out of luck. You can just post it in general. There is a way to like enable people to post links, but I think I have to like mod them on YouTube or something. Which I kind of just don't go around doing. Here's what you do to allow it. Let's see. You've got. Is it cool if I look on this on the stream? I assume it was since you were about to post it into chat. I realized I asked that and then I covered chat and didn't look at the response. Cool. So it's this init.py and cool imports, registration, random stuff, register, unregister, name. Yeah, this is what I have. I don't have the fancy class registration, but this is exactly what I have. Above is the reload code. Reload. Format off. This. Okay. Mark imports. Format off. Let's just keep this, I guess. Module to reload during development go here. So that is the class names. Add-on preferences. No, that's not class names. Yeah, it is. You're using multi-file. So I assume you have, yeah, add-on preferences.py. So those are reload, add-on preferences, reload. So can I reload dot? Because I only have the one module. Okay. I think I'll keep this link up and I'll play with it a little bit and try to get it to work off stream. We are probably nearing more of the end of stream, so it doesn't look like something that will just work, but okay. So what was I going to do? I was going to do in export. We have get data from active editor. We need to get we have the context key, and the component data. We have that can't be in export, right? Yeah, no, that's update component data. So we have two options. We can do this in the exporter, or we can do this in this function, which grabs that data and sets it. In this case, if the index exists in the component fields, then we want to get the active one, and the data is only going to be for the active one. So I think we don't want the index here. We just want this. We just pick one, basically. Python reload module specifically works on module script files. You made the mistake of trying to use it on classes today, actually. Nice. Yeah, it's useful to have that link because I have never seen the reload code before. So if we insert here, and for one thing, I have like Chris or something, and then for low, maybe I do something else. I don't know what this will do. Cool. So we have two of them set. When we export our GLTF, with any luck, this will only export one of them and not the index. So let's do stream. Let's export. Let's check stream.gltf. And we are still getting both of them, I think. Unless I mistyped something. Scheme, name some things, type path, some things, value one thing. Did I just not export it? That looks like the correct export. GLTF, stream.gltf. Did I just save that in the root? I didn't even go to the assets directory. Yeah, that was my issue. There we go. Now we get the single variant exported. So we are filtering now. And now I just need to comment that code because if somebody else tries to read this. I'm trying to move in now that we're getting to the point at which this is like working for everything. I'm trying to get to the point where everything is got some comments on it all over the place because this is absurd for people who don't know how to write Python to be able to read. Okay. I'm happy with that. Make sure we didn't break anything else. What else was working? Player was working. What else was working? Tuple struct is working. Task priority should be working. Is that basically everything? And then, oh, I left a timer container in there. Whoops. Maybe we'll try timer container and see what it does. Probably breaks. But player, some things. So player is a struct. Some things is in a complex enum, one with a struct variant, one with a tuple variant. Team member is a nested struct with a enum for the team field and a struct for the player field. Tuple struct is a single value tuple struct. Task priority is a single value enum. Timer container shouldn't work. Multi-element tuple struct shouldn't work. And marker, I think I broke, but we can go back and fix. Can only concatenate string, not GLTF to export user extension to string. Okay, so I broke one of these in the export. Unless it is key error value. Let's see, scheme. Some things gives us the data, team member, player, task priority didn't get set. So one thing we're not doing currently is setting default values for enums. Right, so enum, let's go make property. For strings, I think that one of these needs to be the default. So I'll leave myself a note here because I'm not going to do it right now. To do, make an enum default value. And then that means for task priority, we should be able to just set one of them. And then our export should work. And if we look at stream.gltf, we end up with some things with a variant of one name Chris, team member with the player with the substruct and the enum, player with the values, task priority, medium, tuple struct 300. This is the plugin effectively all working. This is it. we have spent 2 weeks to get to this point exactly. So we could use this now, I think. 0.16 RC is going to come out soon. There might be some experimentation in getting this to work for 0.15 in the meantime. This, of course, the whole thing was meant to work for the other game that we were working on, which I don't know that I have it open on this monitor currently. But yeah, so this whole plugin is meant to replace this struct here, which is awful. This struct is awful. That is all like hard-coded custom property stuff inside of Blender. CD GitHub Bevy 0.15 game. Which directory did I put this in? I must have this enabled somewhere. Mobile, Zalish, chat logs, relationships demo. There we go. What is this? Oh, I just named it 15. That's why. GitHub Rust Adventure Bevy 15 game. So yeah, I've run this recently. Cool. So this is the game that we originally started this project for. The reason being that we have all of these levels defined in Blender and stuff, and components on the boxes and things like that. And we got to this point, and I realized that doing all the platforms and everything with components was getting really hairy without a like a real Blender integration. So that's what kicked off this whole project. Oh, make it. Oh. Currently, all of the Blender information for that project is in this one struct, which is really awful. Like, and it was just getting worse and worse every weekend. So we started doing this Blender thing to replace this. I think we've gotten it to a point where all of this can be replaced. So I think we'll try to integrate it maybe on Saturday. I don't know. This is a 0.15 game. The plugin is written against 0.16, so we need to do some backporting to get it to work. I don't know if we'll be able to do that. We'll see. I think BRP should be backportable, but I don't know. I haven't tried to do it yet. But other than that, this is feeling really good. Push that up. This is feeling really good. This gets us to like a usable Bevy insert component modify values workflow the UI, the UX of the experience of working with these components is not great, right? Like, I don't know. I don't love some of these editor interfaces like this one, but I don't know that we have that much of a choice, honestly. And we can't write, or we theoretically could write custom UI here, but I don't want to. That sounds like a terrible idea. And then we get all of that registry data exported in GLTF extras. And from here, it all already just works. So, hype. That's it for the stream today. But yeah, this is like working, like actually working. So maybe I screenshot this. A couple of times. Then screenshot this, I guess. I think that's it. I think that's the only things people, I don't think people care about the actual specifics, but yeah, anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging out, everyone. Stream on Saturday again, Saturday morning, as usual. And I will see you then. Hey, Lemonsy. Sorry, we're just ending. We just got everything working for the Blender plugin. Since you're here, I will click through it, but we have all the forms working for all the component insertions for all of the stuff that we would want to put, I guess, on this cube at the moment. And then that all exports into the GLTF file, which then can get instantiated. So we're looking good. But yeah, I'll catch you all Saturday morning. Thanks for stopping by.